Hello everyone, this is Adnan with another video on VCP 6.7 and 7 training, and in this video we are going to learn about DRS, which is Distributed Resource Scheduler. Distributed Resource Scheduler is basically a service in one of the advanced features in vCenter by which you can load balance your environment. So basically there are four features that DRS provides through vCenter to all the ESXi hosts. Number one is load balancing, number two VM placement, number three power management, number four optimize and better performance. Now in terms of load balancing, first of all, DRS is a service that manages load in on all ESXi hosts. So for example, there are these three ESXi hosts, and there are VMs on each ESXi host. It could be 10 ESXi hosts, and each ESXi host can have 20 VMs each, or in this case there are three ESXi hosts and all the VMs are working. Now as long as ESXi hosts are under 50% or 60% utilization, that is fine. But as long as these VMs stay under 50 or 60%, there is no problem. But as soon as when any ESXi host goes above 70, 80, or reach 90%, DRS kicks in, and DRS, what it does, it will move VMs out from this ESXi host to another ESXi host where it is less utilized. Now DRS basically is monitoring CPU and RAM. DRS basically monitors CPU and RAM on ESXi host. If CPU reaches above 80%, and we can set up that threshold, 80% or 90%, CPU reaches 80% or 90%, or RAM is used more than 80% or 90. In both cases, it will move VM to a less utilized ESXi host. So that's the main purpose of DRS. In real life, you can take an example of a person who is managing the team. So a manager in a team manages the employees or the team members and send them according to where it is more required. So DRS plays exactly the same load. It manages the load on ESXi host. So as soon as any ESXi host reaches 90% or above, or 80% or above, and we can configure that setting, whatever the threshold we need to set within our environment. What DRS does, it will move the VMs from this ESXi host to another ESXi host. That basically cause the CSXi host to basically the CPU will be freeing up the resources within that ESXi host and moving those VMs to the other ESXi host. And you can see here it is now 55%, this is 50%. And if we look at the previous image, it was sitting on 90%. As soon as two of the VMs are moved to ESXi1, the utilization will increase here on ESXi1, but it will be stabilized on this. And in the next picture, you can see the both ESXi hosts are stable. So that's one of the functions of DRS, that it load balances VM. The second function of DRS is VM placement. Now VM placement, basically it is a feature in which as soon as a new VM starts, DRS will find the best suited host for that VM. So let's say this VM is shut down. If the VMs are running, VM placement has nothing to do with the running VMs. As soon as you restart this VM, or maybe this VM was shut down and you started this VM, so what it does, it will find that less utilized host, the least utilized host, and move and start the VM on that ESXi host. So for example, if this VM is started and the least utilized host at the moment is this host, so VM will be started on this host. So VM will be using CPU and memory of this host. So these are the two main features of DRS. Number one, load balancing. Number two, VM placement. replacement. Also, there is a power management as well. And in power management, what happens is that if there is a space on ESXi host, so let's say this is 55% utilized, meaning you can move one of the VMs here, and once this VM is moved to this ESXi host, the utilization will slightly go higher. But this now ESXi host is free and doing nothing because there is no ESXi, there is no VM sitting on this. So power management, with the power management setting, DRS will shut down this ESXi host, and that will basically save power and power consumption or electricity for the organization. So shutting down the ESXi host is known as power management, in which this VM will be moved to another ESXi host. Once this ESXi host is free, this ESXi host will be shut down. And power management can also do the same thing as soon as if the CPU is used more than 90% or RAM is used more than 90%, and this is highly utilized. So in this case what happens is it will basically it will start this ESXi host as well. So it will start the ESXi host and shut down the ESXi host as per the requirement of the infrastructure. So these are the three functions, and also it will optimize all of the resources within these ESXi host. Now the requirement of ESXi host is the requirement that you must have a vCenter. You must have vCenter number one. You have vMotion enabled in this network, and for vMotion you can look at the previous video, but you must have vMotion in that network. You also have vCenter, and then you can enable DRS. Now once the DRS is configured, you can run, there are three automation levels that DRS can take decisions and automatically move VMs from one ESXi host, because here if you look at this diagram, it is moving one VM to another VM. So DRS can run in three modes: manual mode, partially automated mode, and fully automated mode. In manual mode, DRS is monitoring, and DRS what it does, it will check in the manual mode. It will keep on monitoring the ESXi host. As soon as it sees that this ESXi2 is 90% utilized, instead of moving any VMs, what it does, it will provide recommendation to the VMware admin. It won't take any action. It will provide recommendation to VMware admin. That is known as manual mode. If in partially automated mode, as soon as it sees that there needs to be an action taken and VM needs to be moved to another ESXi host, so it will only take action for critical 1 and 2 VM. So the VM that we set up to be critical VMs, those VMs will be moved, and rest of the VMs will stay there, and we will get a recommendation. In fully automated mode, DRS can take all the decisions that it needs to take whenever it needs to move VMs from here to here or from here to here. So DRS will take all the decisions. So these are the automation modes. There is manual intermission, and there is manual automation mode, in which DRS will monitor the environment and provide recommendation and don't take any action. Partially automated mode, it will monitor the environment. It will take action only for the critical 1 and critical type 2 VMs, and not all of the VMs. In fully automated mode, it will monitor the environment and provide recommendation, and also it will take action for any VMs. So let's get started with this. Then there is actually one more thing. DRS has affinity rules. Affinity rules says there is affinity rules, VM affinity rule, VM host affinity rule. Affinity rule will just say that which VM needs to stay together on ESXi host. So keep VMs together on ESXi host, or separate VMs, separate virtual machines. Now that means in this case what happens is, let's say these two VMs needs to be together always on this ESXi host, and the example is Active Directory server and DNS server. Active Directory server and DNS server mostly are one server, but in large environment you can have one Active Directory server and the other DNS server. So in case affinity rule says that if this VM needs to move on to this ESXi host, this VM will move to this along with this. So both VMs will always stay together wherever they are moved in the environment. So affinity rule is this, and the second rule in the affinity rule. So affinity rules are of two types. One is keeping VMs together, and the other is keeping VMs separated. So let's say this VM is Active Directory domain controller 1, and this is domain controller 2. We don't want both domain controllers to be sitting on one ESXi host. Why? If this ESXi host goes down, then both domain controller will go down. So separate affinity rule says that domain DC1 will be here and DC1 will be on this one. So that means if that rule exists, then if this VM needs to move to another ESXi host, this VM can only move to this ESXi host where DC2 is not there. So these are the two affinity rules. So guys, let's get started. Let's configure DRS, and let's see that how we can configure all these options. So for that, I'm gonna just jump onto my vCenter. So within the vCenter, I have, so I'm already logged into a vCenter. I have two ESXi hosts. I have third ESXi host, which is not working at the moment. So the very first requirement is you must have data center. Then within the data center, you must have vCenter. This is a vCenter, and then second one, you must have a data center, and then in the data center, you must have a cluster. So without cluster, you cannot switch on. You cannot have DRS. So for that, I'm just gonna create a cluster first. So cluster, since this cluster will be sitting in Toronto region, so I'm gonna create that cluster in Toronto. So this is TORCL01. So I'm going to call this TORCL01. I can enable DRS right from here, but I'm going to wait and enable this later in the configuration. So once the cluster is created, so first of all, you need to create a cluster, and the cluster will be here any moment. The cluster is here. Then we need to move our ESXi host. So I have two ESXi hosts here. Both ESXi hosts needs to go into the cluster. So it goes into this cluster, and this ESXi host also goes into this cluster. So both ESXi host or all the ESXi hosts you have must be part of the cluster. So it's moving one of the ESXi hosts to the cluster. So one is already moved into the cluster. I'm going to move the second ESXi host, which is this one, into the cluster as well. And we can move the third ESXi host, but third ESXi host is not running, so I'm just going to keep it as is. As you can see now, both ESXi host is part of the cluster. Now when ESXi hosts are part of the cluster, their all resources are considered part of the cluster. So if there are two CPUs on this and two CPUs on this, so power of this cluster is 4 CPUs. So the cluster is basically cluster is the total capacity of a cluster is equal to the total capacity of ESXi host. Now in order to configure DRS, you need to select cluster here, and on this side you have vSphere. So I'm going to go into vSphere DRS, and within DRS all I need to do, it is off at the moment. I am going to switch it on. Remember that DRS will do load balancing, main function of DRS, as soon as you enable this option. So I'm enabling this option, and the very first thing is automation level, that you are making a monitor, you are making a manager of DRS will be the manager of all these VMs within these ESXi host. So DRS will decide that which VMs will be going on to which ESXi host if there is load balancing is required. So here we have fully automated mode, we have manual mode. If I change first to start with manual mode is saying the DRS generates both power on placement recommendation. This is power on this is VM placement, and also it will provide migration recommendation for VMs, and it won't take any action. Recommendation needs to be manually applied or ignored. Now the problem with manual automation mode is that, let's say at 2 a.m. at night, if ESXi 2 is 90% utilized, and by the morning you're not able to apply the recommendation, in that case In that case what happens is I mean the server can crash. So manual, you have to apply all the recommendation. If you don't apply the recommendation, and how do you apply a recommendation? You need to log into vCenter and then click apply. So then it will move VMs out from that ESXi host that is highly utilized. So for that reason we will keep that fully automated mode. It will monitor the environment and key and take the action whenever VM needs to move from one ESXi host to another. And there is a partially automated mode where DRS automatically places VM on host at the VM power on, and migration recommendation needs to be manually applied or ignored. But it will take action. It will take action based on the migration threshold. So this is migration threshold. Should the DRS be in conservative mode or aggressive mode? So let's say if I change it to fully automated mode, and we will keep our DRS on fully automated mode. In this mode we can say conservative. Conservative simply means that DRS will not take action aggressively, so it will take action conservatively, which means DRS will only apply recommendation that must be taken to satisfy the cluster constraints. Whereas if I say aggressive mode, then DRS provide recommendation when the workload are even slightly imbalanced. So when you do aggressive and fully automated mode, that can be risky for an environment, because then DRS, as soon as it see a little imbalance in between these ESXi hosts, it will start moving VMs around in ESXi hosts just to balance them. Now the problem with this is the more V motion is happening on ESXi host, the more CPU will be busy. For that reason, we won't keep DRS for aggressive mode. We will keep DRS with conservative mode and the default mode. So here we have predictive DRS. Predictive DRS is basically a setting in which we can basically DRS can predict in future that, after based on the last 2 weeks, you must move these VMs elsewhere, or these VM needs to be elsewhere. So it predicts based on the last 2 weeks or last performance of ESXi host, and it can predict future that the best setting for these ESXi host is that 5 VM stays on 2 and 1 VM stays on, let's say 2 VM stays on ESX1. We have automation, so this is just the automation level. In additional options, we have VM distribution, so we'll just leave it as is at the moment. We're not using CPU over commitment as well. This is CPU over commitment is basically that how much over committed CPU can be on these ESXi hosts. So let's say if I can say let's say four over commitment. So 4 over commitment means that I can create VMs more than the capacity of these ESXi hosts. At the moment, I'm not enabling this option. So let's say these VMs that are running, they require 10 CPUs. But in the cluster, according to ESXi hosts, you have only 4 CPUs. 4 vCPUs. With overcommitment, you can create VMs for 10 vCPUs, and you can run them, and DRS will automatically manage this option. We are not going to select that at the moment. There is scalable shares as well. If we enable the shares, it will create a resource pool, and I'm gonna go to the resource pool later on. At the moment, this is power management. Power management is that option in which that whenever DRS sees an ESXi host can be free of VMs, it can shut down that VM. It can shut down that ESXi host. Now, in an environment of just 2 ESXi hosts, this won't work properly. Power management is only for large number of ESXi hosts in an environment, and this is a risky option as well. Most of the companies do not use this option unless it is absolutely required. In advanced option, there is nothing much. There is, yes, in advanced option we can create affinity rules. So in affinity rules we can create an affinity rule saying affinity rule 1, keep DC together. So we can create an affinity rule saying that keep DCs separate. Keep DCs separate. meaning the two DCs will be separate. And in the value, we can select here in the value that we can configure that value. So I'm just gonna select that here, and DRS is configured, and here you can see the DRS will be configured. Now we still need to configure the affinity rule later on in the advanced option here, but for now what happens is at the moment this is being DRS is being configured. So it will take a little it will take few moments, probably less than 10 minutes to configure DRS. So reconfigure the cluster. It is configured. I think DRS is on at the moment, and if we go down here, fully automated mode, looking at this option here, we can see it is on fully automated mode. At the moment there is only one VM running, so there is not many changes happening. If I go to advanced options here, go to power management is off, and affinity rules are not configured at the moment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch on these VMs. So first of all, let's switch this on. And so let's switch all of the VMs on, and we'll see if there is any change needs to be required. For now, since there is only one VM working, we won't be able to see any progress in DRS. So guys, later in another video, in the next video, I'm going to show you that how to work with HA and FT. While working with HA and FT, we'll see some recommendation, we'll see some action being taken by DRS in this environment. So at the moment, these VMs are dummy VMs. We know that the only VM that has operating system is this VM. So for now, let me just start these VMs so that we can put some, we can apply some pressure on this. So VMs are turned on, few VMs are on, and if I go to VMs here, so change to VM, I'm still on the cluster, and there are 1, 2, 3, and 4 VMs are they're switching on. So in the other video, when I will be configuring Okay, so just wanted to show you one more thing before I can finish this video, that you can go to cluster and go to summary, and within the summary you will be able to see the summary of DRS. So this is at this point DRS, the score, the balance of score is 14% used. So the total cluster resources, only 14% resources are used. So which is fine for DRS, and here we can see view DRS settings. You can view the DRS settings right from here, and it will take you to the DRS setting, and you can view all of the VMs as well. So in order to see the DRS summary, you can go to the cluster and you can look at it here. Thank you for watching this.